with our weekly update here on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Thanks for joining us this week, this busy week. For those of you concerned about corruption here in Washington, D.C., it's been a very important week. Disclosures about deep state corruption that would probably have Richard Nixon turning over in his grave, and some major developments confirming our worst suspicions about the way the Justice Department and the FBI have been operating recently. And on top of that, we've got this new challenge of what to do about these DACA recipients, the so-called dreamers, and whether that challenge is going to be responded to by our political class with a massive amnesty with virtually no assurances of security. You can guess where I'm going there. But a lot to talk about, and of course Judicial Watch is in the center of it all. You name it, Judicial Watch is fighting for truth, justice, and they use the old phrase, the American way, at least when it comes to government accountability and transparency. And first up is the extraordinary developments related to the FBI text messages between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. Lisa Page, a top lawyer in the FBI, Peter Strzok at the time, a top counterintelligence official in the FBI, and they were messaging back and forth, you may recall, about President Trump and Hillary Clinton. And the problem with that is they were anti-Trump and pro-Hillary Clinton, it looks like. And on top of that, Strzok himself was the lead investigator at the FBI, it looks like, on the Clinton email matter. Again, pro-Hillary Clinton and anti-Donald Trump. And then once the Trump alleged collusion investigation began, he was the top lead guy there, one of the top leaders, both in the Justice Department investigation of collusion, supposedly under Obama, and then the Mueller operation came in and took it over, and he went over and worked for Mueller until these text messages were discovered requiring his removal from the Mueller investigation back in August. An act that Mueller took without telling anyone, at least publicly, why he was taking the act. So all this is out there. And then it's announced in a letter to Congress, I think it was sent last Friday, typical Friday night news dump, that the text messages for several months between Strzok and Page were missing. They supposedly hadn't been collected. There was a glitch. Now, of course, I didn't believe it for a minute. We've been through this before with the IRS, with Hillary Clinton and the State Department. We know these messages are out there to be retrieved by law enforcement. With Hillary Clinton, obviously, her emails, they never told us about the emails, and then the emails they did tell us about, it turned out it was half of what she had taken with her when she left the State Department. She supposedly deleted the rest of them. Well, the FBI was able to recover many of the emails that she deleted or otherwise hid. With Lois Lerner and the IRS, we were told there were emails that were lost because there were no backup tapes. Turns out there were backup tapes. So don't you believe anything the government has to say when it comes to the missing government information. Just don't believe it. It's all recoverable, and usually in matters of political import or public policy import, they're usually just being hidden. And it's a convenience. Accidentally on purpose they lose the material, as I like to say. Well, in the case of Strzok and Page, not only this was these text messages they were responsive to what Congress was looking for, but Judicial Watch had multiple Freedom of Information Act lawsuits to which these messages could have been responsive and were certainly almost definitely responsive. Now, we've been pushing the Justice Department and the FBI for these text messages as soon as we learned they existed, because A, they should have already been produced to us, but B, we were concerned that they weren't even being looked at. And the response from this Justice Department and this FBI was essentially to tell us to jump in a lake. That's right. They didn't want to turn them over to us, and they said, if you really want them, well, you have because we finally filed a separate FOIA request. Well, you've got that other FOIA request, which they've ignored. But we sued about it, I think on Wednesday, when was it? Wednesday or Thursday. When did we see Matt? Wednesday or Thursday? Anyway, earlier this week. A few hours after we sued, they found the text messages. The Inspector General of the Justice Department, I guess, just flipped the switch and they magically appeared. Which makes me think that the news that they were not around or had not been captured was bogus to begin with. And I don't think the Justice Department and the FBI were prepared for the blowback. So on top of that, the text messages that have been uncovered thus far and released to Congress, but not to Judicial Watch. You know, it's easy to release documents to Congress if you're an administration or the deep state, because you can withhold things with impunity. You just give them partial productions. There's no real accountability other than political pressure because Congress rarely goes to court. And in fact, one of the text messages that have been uncovered suggests that Peter Strzok and Lisa Page knew that because there was FBI material that they acknowledged would be very controversial that they could withhold from Congress, but the problem was it would probably have to be disclosed under FOIA, which is what Judicial Watch specializes in. So they're keeping these text messages away from us on purpose because they know that we'll get more of them and they won't be able to hide them the way I think they're hiding them from Congress. That all being said, there's a lot of interesting material in what they did turn over to Congress and what Congress has released. And they show that Strzok, most recently, the most recent batch shows that Strzok and Page were concerned about the FBI going full bore on the Hillary Clinton email investigation because they were afraid of what Hillary Clinton might do if she won the presidency. And they were thinking, will she remember? So this was politics front and center in the Clinton email investigation. And then famously there's talk of a secret society. It's been suggested it was a joke. We have every reason to believe it wasn't a joke. And by a secret society, this was part of the anti-Trump effort in the FBI, it looks like. I mean, the secret society may have been a joking way to describe the group of deep staters in the FBI who didn't like President Trump. And as you may recall from the prior text messages, Peter Strzok talked about having an insurance policy. I mean, were they working against actively the incoming president of the United States, the FBI, because they didn't like his politics? It's just incredible. So these text messages are pretty explosive. And on top of that, we have this whole release the memo effort, which is now being outrageously opposed by the left and the establishment, and yes, the Justice Department and FBI. So I like Jeff Sessions, but he's recused himself from the Russia investigation. So on these important public policy matters and anti-corruption matters, it's the deep state running the show at the Justice Department. And so the Justice Department is opposing the idea of professionals in the House Intelligence Committee reviewing the dossier information, summarizing material in a way that can be shared with the American people ultimately. And they're calling that reckless because the Justice Department wants to get its hands on this info because they know it's going to make the Justice Department and FBI look bad. Because what is the issue allegedly? The dossier, paid for by Hillary Clinton, was used, it looks like, to obtain FISA warrants, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act warrants, which are secretive, against the Trump team. And the concern is they didn't tell the court that they were using Clinton campaign propaganda and mudslinging to justify using the FBI and Justice Department to spy on Team Trump. Based on what we've been told about what's in that memo that hasn't been released yet, that's almost for sure what's in there. No wonder the Justice Department wants to get its hands on it. The deep staters. So this is the process. The Intelligence Committee has to vote on it to release the information because it may or may not be classified. And then the President Trump, has 5 days to object. And you can bet he's going to receive a lot of pressure from the establishment class to object. But even if he objects, because this is a House product, the House can vote in full to release the document. And I think the intelligence professionals at the House Intelligence Committee working for the Republicans are smart enough to protect truly classified information that, if released, would harm our national security. But I tell you what my experience is. The government misuses classified material, or the ability to classify material, to keep government corruption information away from the American people. And it's not about national security, it's about protecting their own hides. In the case of Hillary Clinton, they were actually not classifying material because they didn't want to embarrass her or put her in further legal jeopardy by having more classified material for people to point to justify her arrest. These are the folks telling the House, don't release this information to the American people, so the American people have information as to how the Justice Department and the FBI conducted itself during the Obama administration, during this political campaign, where it looks like they were turned into tools of the Clinton operation to spy on President Trump. So you got to ask your members of Congress where they stand on this, I would suggest. But in the meantime, Judicial Watch is asking for the underlying documents. We shouldn't have to rely on summary data presented by the House of Representatives to find out the truth of what went on. The underlying applications in support of the warrants should be declassified and released. The dossier information should be declassified and released. All these text messages should be released. I don't know why they're sending it to Congress. I mean, Congress can withhold the text messages. We don't know what they're getting, how much they're getting, whether anything is being improperly withheld. There's got to be a legal process for getting it out. And but this Justice Department, because they're allowing the bureaucracy to run it, is less transparent than the Obama Justice Department. I'm telling you that. It's not good news, it's bad news. I know we're on the 1-year anniversary of President Trump's inauguration, but that's been a major issue. The Justice Department and the FBI are completely out to lunch on transparency, hostile to it, and playing shell games. They've been playing shell games on these text messages. The arrogance and corruption we've been getting from those agencies on these, we're used to a lot of games from the government. But when we're told, that when we know there's information out there and we call them on it, and they basically tell us to go and sue us in court if you want it, we talk about contempt for the rule of law and accountability. But that's what we're getting from the FBI run by Christopher Wray. At least Jeff Sessions has some plausible deniability. He's not involved in the Russia issues, I would presume. What's Chris Wray's defense? Let me say something about the FBI director. It's been reported, and I know the reports can sometimes not be true, but quite credibly, that there was pressure by the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, appropriate, to remove his number 2, Andrew McCabe, at the FBI. Now, who's Andrew McCabe? Judicial Watch exposed him to be a anti-Trump, pro-Hillary Clinton partisan. His wife received $500,000 plus, or $700,000, from one of Clinton's cronies, Terry McAuliffe, the corrupt governor of Virginia. And he didn't recuse himself from the Clinton email investigation until just a week before the election in 2016. He should have been recused. He's under a series of investigations over misconduct and politicizing his position. And Sessions said, well, why is this guy still here? And of course, he's also been implicated in these text messages as part of the insurance policy discussion. Why is he still there as number 2? Now, Judicial Watch disclosures have led to pressure, which supposedly means he's going to resign or retire in March. But supposedly, Chris Wray said, if you're going to force me to fire Andrew McCabe, I'm going to quit. So Chris Wray is obviously part of the problem. He's defending Andrew McCabe. Peter Strzok is still at the FBI. Lisa Page, as best as I know, is still at the FBI. There's enough there to in the least, remove them from the premises. Suspend them. And maybe some significant criminal action. Well, this is a crisis of confidence a rule of law crisis. The FBI, fundamentally at the top levels, I know there are honest people who work at the FBI, the agents. We talk to a bunch of these retired agents. They know what's happening. The leadership is completely, at least the new leadership, they're oblivious to it. The old leadership that's still running the show in large measure is corrupted. The agency needs top to bottom reform. I don't know if it can be saved. Justice Department, same deal. So I think this is a race now, because the news is Robert Mueller, the out of control, unconstitutional, conflicted, compromised Robert Mueller operation, they want to interview President Trump. I guess that's not news. It was perfectly foreseeable. And so they're negotiating with the president's lawyers as to what the status of that is going, whether that's going to happen, and what types of questions are going to be asked, which is just typical. That's it's not unusual that negotiations taking place. President Trump comes out and says, "Oh, I'll talk to them under oath," or I'll be happy to sit down and talk to them. But his lawyers have other ideas, because obviously there's significant legal jeopardy to anyone talking to this FBI DOJ Mueller operation. And given the conflicts and the compromise and the bias at his operation, boy, I don't know if I would do that. So there's a race now, because I think the memo that is going to expose the dossier, the further release of text messages, is going to further undermine the Mueller operation. Some have suggested that if the memo comes out, the Mueller operation would be shut down. So you can bet Mueller is eager to depose or question Mr. Trump before this memo comes out. So there's a race. Now, I don't know that for a fact. I'm just giving you my analysis of it. So it's important this information come out either way. And so the process is proceeding, and we'll see what happens with the House. But in the meantime, Judicial Watch has the lawsuits to get the info. And again, we're being stonewalled on key information about the most important criminal investigation the Justice Department is undertaking, the Robert Mueller Special Counsel operation. I can guarantee you there are no resources, there's no comparable investigation in the Justice Department that has as many resources devoted to it as the Mueller operation. I think he just hired his 17th prosecutor. 17. Based on what I know, there are terrorist investigations that have had fewer prosecutors associated with it. And what is he investigating? I don't know. He's not investigating Russia collusion by all accounts. Based on a published report in CNN, he doesn't even want to ask Trump about whether they colluded with Russia. He's asking about whether he was about the firing of Flynn and Comey. I don't know how Mueller can even talk about the firing of Comey, his professional associate. Mueller himself interviewed with President Trump, supposedly, or at least the White House, for the FBI job that became open as a result of Comey's firing. He's obviously conflicted. I mean, news reports are today that President Trump was thinking Mueller was so conflicted he should be fired. And of course, his lawyers got in the way and didn't want to do that, and President Trump, I guess, stood down. But it's what we've been saying. He is conflicted. What's outrageous to me, it's President Trump having to do this. It speaks well of his leadership and acumen that he understands what's at stake and the obvious compromises to the rule of law with having Mueller run that special counsel operation. And it's really shameful that the Justice Department allows Mueller to keep on running. But he's the king of the Justice Department. And that's why they're stalling on the text messages. That's why they're trying to get the House to stall the release of the memo, because Mueller is the king of the Justice Department when it comes to these issues. We asked, under law, for information about his budget, how he's being monitored, and the scope of his investigation. Because Mueller supposedly proposed a budget. This is how much it's going to cost. Don't you think the public has a right to know that? Well, of course, we were stonewalled by this Justice Department. So we sued in federal court for the information. I think we sued earlier this year. And, no, we sued last year. We sued in October. Shows you how patient we are. So Mueller had a budget proposal. And they just told us, they found 7 pages. And they're not going to give us any of that information, because the release of the information would interfere with law enforcement proceedings, and the material is protected from disclosure by the deliberative process privilege. How would it interfere with law enforcement proceedings? I'm sure you can concoct a reason, especially those of you who are lawyers. The deliberative process privilege is completely discretionary. What is the deliberative process privilege? Well, it's probably one of the most widely abused privileges that allow the government to withhold information from the American people. When you make a decision in government, the deliberations prior to the final decision and the documents about that can be withheld oftentimes and protected from disclosure. But there's no requirement they be withheld, because the test is because the release of the information would chill future government deliberations. So how would the release of a proposed budget targeting of an investigation targeting the President of the United States, why would that harm or chill government deliberations? First of all, it's a fact, so I don't even know what's deliberative about it. And even if it is deliberative, because sometimes the courts have ruled some facts are part of the deliberative process privilege, it's completely discretionary. So this Justice Department has made the decision, not required by law, but just a political decision, a tactical decision, to keep this key information about what Mueller's up to away from the American people, namely his budget. And we asked for other information, which I think is interesting, because we wanted a copy of all the guidance memos and communications by which the Justice Management Decision will review his budget. How is he being managed? They've ignored that request. And we wanted a copy of each document about the governance of his operation. Tell us how you're managing them. They completely ignored that request. And this is a Rod Rosenstein special, the number 2 at the Justice Department. So there are a lot of problems in the Justice Department and the FBI when it comes to transparency on this Russia collusion scandal, transparency on the Clinton email scandal and its mishandling and investigations, the mishandling of its investigations. And it's disappointing. And the president, you can see he wanted to fire Mueller. He knows what to do. So thankfully at Judicial Watch, we're still a free country. We can talk about the Mueller Special Counsel operation and try to hold it accountable to the rule of law. And I can tell you there's no one else in court with as many lawsuits trying to hold the Mueller operation accountable to the rule of law. No one in the Justice Department wants to do it in an effective way. They're spending all their resources trying to protect it. But Judicial Watch is in federal court, and we're pleased to be able to do the work. And I get excited that we're able to do this work, and thank you for support that allows us to do it. But isn't it outrageous that it's only Judicial Watch in court doing this? We have to sue to get basic budget information about the Mueller operation? We have to sue for text messages that are being disclosed to Congress, and they don't want to disclose it to us for FOIA? Zero interest in doing it. We've been asking for this type of information, some of our cases, since 2015. For instance, we asked for, just recently, I guess we sued last year on behalf of a supervisory FBI agent, someone who's retired, who knows pretty much where to look and what's important about it in the FBI operations. We asked for information about Andrew McCabe's involvement in the Clinton email scandal, namely his text messages. This is the number 2 I told you about. And the FBI just gave us their final production of information with no text messages from Andrew McCabe. Thoroughly corrupt. dishonest response. There are no text messages of the number 2 official of Andrew McCabe related to the Clinton investigation? Are you kidding me? We told them where to look and they still couldn't find them? This FBI, it's one thing to have these battles over documents that Congress gets into. Where is the oversight over the way the FBI is managed by Congress? Because it's clear, when you look at these text messages between Strzok and Page, there was a culture of corruption at the FBI that was unchecked. Under Mr. Comey, set up, based on what I understand, Mueller really got the ball rolling in terms of the arrogance and corruption at leadership headquarters in the FBI. And Comey came in and, following Mueller's lead, brought in his cronies at the top levels, and it looks like, based on these text messages, they could say or do whatever they wanted. And I guess they all thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. That's why Peter Strzok was worried about investigating her, because they were afraid of payback, because that's what Hillary was known for. But we've got a real ethics crisis at the FBI. And this Justice Department, they're just protecting Mueller. So don't be distracted by the release the memo fight. In the sense, we want the memo released. I think it's important it's released. I told you why it's important. I encourage you to contact your members to share your views about it. But there's so many other battles to be fought, because this is just one battle. So the other big debate here in Washington, D.C., on to other pleasant news, is amnesty. You hear DACA, you hear Dreamers, you hear whatever. It's amnesty. And President Trump ran on a strong law and order platform on immigration. Built the wall. You can go through a list of promises. And I think he opposed DACA initially during the campaign. So you may recall President Obama couldn't get amnesty for the children of immigrants. There's our train coming by. The children of illegal immigrants brought into the country, I guess before they were of age. I guess 15. And they wanted to pass an amnesty for that group. And it was unable to be passed by Congress. The Democrats who ran Congress, they controlled Congress. They think they had a filibuster-proof majority when President Obama came in, and they didn't pass this amnesty. So what did President Obama do? Well, he decided he thought he could grant the amnesty effectively on his own. Highly illegal, highly unconstitutional, and so President Trump promised to overturn that. And he eventually did. But now he's proposing that there be a mass amnesty for DACA for these alleged Dreamers and others in exchange for promises on security and restrictions on immigration. And this is how this amnesty versus security debate always goes forward. The promises, I should say always goes forward, but those who want open borders, because President Trump should understand he's negotiating with people who want open borders. He's not negotiating with people who in good faith want to protect our borders and protect the rule of law. He's dealing with people who want to undermine the rule of law and open the borders. So if you understand that, you should recognize all they want is amnesty. And they will say you can have your security, you can have your immigration restrictions as long as they're basically unenforceable or can easily be rolled back in the future. And unfortunately, President Trump at least his initial offer suggests that's what we're going to get, where you have the DACA amnesty, which would be massive. He would want a wall funding, which would be good, I guess. But these restrictions on immigration and reforms of immigration would effectively take place over 20 years or so. So you know how that works. Amnesty first, security, and the rule of law second. So I don't understand why that process is being, the politics of it. Your guess is as good as mine on politics. Okay, I can just tell you what we know from Judicial Watch about discussions of amnesty, it increases illegal immigration. I think it undermines the rule of law, but it increases illegal immigration. And we know the way the government works, you can bet it's not going to be secure. Because President Obama, when he gave Dreamers this DACA amnesty, he promised that they'd all be thoroughly vetted and no criminals. And that was just a big lie, because Judicial Watch exposed it to be the lie. Because we found the documents showing that they didn't really want to do background reviews of those who were getting the DACA benefit. They were called lean and light, and they just moved them on in. And do you think the government's going to do it again? Even with greater numbers? I think it's over nearly 2 million people. I've got this amazing idea for immigration reform. You want to hear it? It's enforce the law as written. Just enforce the law as written. If the American people wanted immigration reform, it'd be a priority. But it's been year after year. The politicians keep on promoting amnesty, and the American people just say, enforce the rule of law. So when you hear all the establishment politicians getting together and saying we need to fix the Dreamer problem, hold on to your wallet. Or at least the constitutional equivalent of it. So good news is, and Jeff Sessions has been great on immigration, certainly. Their Justice Department announced they're going to really be going after these sanctuary cities even more aggressively, I think asking for subpoenas, potentially if they don't start complying with requests for information about the compliance of federal law on immigration by not cooperating or preventing their local police who want to, the regular police rank and file want to cooperate with the feds on immigration. The politicians running the big city police departments don't want that to happen, so they keep criminal aliens or information about criminal illegal aliens. I know that's somewhat redundant, but I'm talking about illegal aliens who go on to commit additional felonies like rapes, murders, property crimes, robberies, things like that. They don't want the feds to know they have them in jail, and they want to release them onto the streets without giving the feds an opportunity to figure out whether they're going to be deported or not. Really dangerous, illegal stuff. So the Justice Department is trying to crack down on that within current law. Congress can do more to enforce the law there, but none of that's going to get done unless we give amnesty to 2 million people, it looks like. So what is Judicial Watch doing? We're obviously exposing what's going on through FOIA, but we have challenged sanctuary cities repeatedly. And just last month, Judicial Watch's lawsuit on behalf of a taxpayer against the San Francisco sheriff's infamous sanctuary policy that led to the death of Kate Steinle and probably countless others, the court allowed our case to go forward, which is a big deal legally. I'm not a lawyer, but I know enough that you got to survive that motion to dismiss, is what, when you sue someone, the person you sue oftentimes files a motion to dismiss to kick your case out before it gets anywhere. Well, now this case is proceeding, and I'm hoping it ends the sanctuary policy and protects citizens, both legal and otherwise, from the consequences of these politicians who put public safety last and politics first when it comes to dealing with immigration. So that was a lot to go through, but it's important that you keep track of all of this. I can tell you, you've got to let your members of Congress know and your local politicians know that these issues are important to you. We like tax cuts. Everyone likes tax cuts, I presume. We like regulatory rollbacks. We like changes in policy. But these corruption issues are fundamental. Fundamental. I mean, we had the FBI and Justice Department and intelligence agencies being used to target the political opposition of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton in an election year. Forget about Russia influence on the elections. We don't need Russia when that's happening. That's Russia. That's the sort of thing that we worry about. That was for other countries to do that. We don't want that done in this country. It's a fundamental attack on our Republican form of government. Republican with a small r. The American people are supposed to decide who's going to be the next president. Under law, under our Constitution. We're not allowed to unelected bureaucrats and political appointees abusing their powers to manipulate elections. You know, given the gravity of what went on last year, isn't Mueller's operation almost a joke by comparison? Asking the president, you know, why he fired the FBI director. The FBI director ought to be subject to investigation of what we know was going on under his watch. So don't get distracted by dreamers in DACA. Remember it's Amnesty. And don't get distracted by release the memo. There's a much deeper crisis. It's about the illicit targeting to try to jail or remove from office a sitting president of the United States. So Judicial Watch is on it. We've got the federal lawsuits. We've got the taxpayer lawsuit in San Francisco over the sanctuary policies. And people are looking to us for leadership on it because they don't trust the politicians to get the truth. And we aim to hopefully fulfill your faith in us. And we can do it with your support. And thanks for joining us today. And we'll see you next week because you can bet there'll be more to talk about next week. I have a feeling there'll be even more lawsuits to talk about next week as well. Thanks again, Tom Fitton with Judicial Watch. Over and out. Thank you.